along, everyone, and welcome to Coming Home, Survive and Thrive in Homeschooling. I am especially delighted today for you to meet a newish friend. We met, Laura and I, in Oxford in the UK when our husbands were doing something of a sabbatical over there. Laura's husband and she were over there for about a year, I think, and it was just wonderful to meet them both. We met the first time at the C.S. Lewis Society meeting in Oxford, and then we met up a few times and socialized and enjoyed their hospitality also. And I've asked Laura along today to talk about the classical approach to home education. So, Laura, thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be with you again, even if it is far away.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Why don't you fill in some gaps as I've introduced you? Tell us a bit more about yourself and a little bit of your backstory.
Okay. Um, I homeschooled for 14 years total. And my children are now 27 and 25, two sons. Um, and so I've been out of homeschooling for a little while. And but I never planned on homeschooling. That was not like something I went into marriage with or anything like that. I taught school myself in a public school. I taught math, middle school math, and I loved it. But when after about 7 or 8 years of teaching, 8 years, um, I felt like, oh, I've raised everyone else's children. I wanted to stay home with my own. And so I had been putting my husband through seminary. We had no children at the time. And but after um, those 8 years of teaching, he became a pastor. And I was able to stay home um, and raise our first child, our first son, and learn how to be a mother and learn how to be a pastor's wife. So many things to learn. And then our second son came along about 2.5 years later. And then once my oldest got to be school age, um, I started thinking about what was I going to do for school. And the town that I was in, I just didn't feel like it was a very small town. It had a lot of racial problems, and I volunteered in the school. So I knew kind of what it was going to be like. And I just felt like that wasn't what I felt like God was calling us to do. And so um, I started looking into homeschooling. And I started with um, the book The Well-Trained Mind by let me see, I have it right here. So I grabbed it. I still have it on my shelf because it was a very important book to me. Susan Wise Bauer and Jessie Wise. And they talked about a guide to classical education at home. And reading that book really sparked my interest in homeschooling to be more than, well, I just didn't know much about homeschooling. And that really, I went, wow, I could give my kids a really good education at home. And this sounds like something fun. I want to do this. And so that's how it all started. We moved to New Orleans, and once again, I was like, God, what are you doing bringing me here to this huge city now? And the schools, it's not well known for its schools. And so I once again felt like, okay, God, is this what you want me to do to keep homeschooling? And so yes, that was what I felt He called me to do. And so each year I would do the same thing. I would ask the Lord, is this what you want me to do this year? And after a few years, I said, okay, Lord, I'm quit asking. If you want me to change and do something different, I take it you will do that. So even through Hurricane Katrina, when our house was flooded and we had to move for a year, we lived with Jeff's parents, and we were in a really good place that we could have sent the kids to school, but God had other plans. I continued to homeschool all the way through. And I became the homeschool coordinator after a while at the seminary. And I would plan um, classes. I would plan the homeschool co-op and had some budget to work with, and I would hire teachers and try and meet the needs of the parents and the students and plan field trips and those kind of things, along with the parent board that we had. So it was my kids loved being homeschooled, and there were times when I was looking for the nearest bus to come by the house because I was like, oh no, my youngest son in particular, we just went head to head sometimes. And so through the years, there were times when I was like, do you want to go to school? You can go to school. It's fine with me. And but we love the classical education approach. We kind of did we started with the classical and then it kind of morphed into something different, kind of more of a unit study type along with the classical education. Does
Mm.
that help? Did I tell you enough?
It does. It does. We've got a lot that we can go back and talk about in there. Thank you for that.
Okay.
All right. So you ended up starting with the classical education, and then, as per a
Mhm.
true homeschooler, you make it your own, don't you? You.
Exactly.
So I'm guessing then that the well-trained mind just solidified that that approach was a good one. Did you spend any more time going, oh, but what about that approach? What about this one? What about Charlotte Mason? Or did you just go, no, I'm happy with this. Let's go.
Oh, I was always looking at different things. I was. I would look at um different approaches. I would pull from some things if I felt like I needed something more um workbook type, like for um of course, for the math, I wanted to go the workbook route. And um, uh, sometimes if I was having a difficult time, I would switch over to something that seemed to be more to fit more easily into the day,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Oh, it
Hmm.
does. Oh, it does. And I
Hmm.
think that that demonstrates the confidence that you have in homeschooling, and also that you recognize that there are times when you need to make those changes. So that already is a great tip for the homeschool mums and dads watching, is that at
Hmm.
any time you can morph into something else, slow down, stop it for a
Hmm.
while, try something else. So that's
Hmm.
encouraging. All right, so you would have talked this over with your husband and before you decided that you would commit to the classical education. So what was important to you and Jeff at the time that made you realize that there were elements in this classical approach that fitted what you desired for your children's education?
Mm. Well, um, we wanted them to be thinkers. We wanted them to uh, to be able to read and um, and draw out of the text um, what the book was saying, and to be able to articulate it well. And we just felt like using real books um, was so much more beneficial. We wanted them to enjoy reading and not just have to get through a textbook. And so the reading was a big issue with us. We wanted that. We liked the idea of mixing literature and history together and integrating those along with the sciences and um, just the music and just giving them a just kind of a big um, from every angle coming at um, the topics that we were studying.
You mentioned you wanted them to read real books just
Hmm.
so ago. What do you mean by real books, Laura?
Well, what I mean is, I wanted them to um, learn from instead of a literature book with short stories and snippets of, say, um, The Hobbit in there, or um, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the um, um, the story of Anne Frank. Just little story uh, summaries, or just pieces of the story. We wanted them to read the whole book, the whole thing. And even if it meant we read it to them when they were younger, then we would do that. And sometimes we would start out with maybe an abbreviated version when they were younger that they could read themselves, and then we would fill in the rest. But then once they got, to where they could read well, we tried to introduce the real book, and feeling that it had value, that the writer you know, was talented, and things were well written. So those are the kind of books we wanted them to read, and felt like they could do that. Even though my oldest son struggled to read, um, it was, I thought he would never quit going, the cat, you know, and he was probably, um, like, I think he was 9 years old when he picked up a book, and he wanted to go. We were going on a trip, and he went to the bookstore, bought a book that was The Ranger's Apprentice. That was the name of the book. And he loved that. His older friend had introduced it to him, and he thought he wanted to read it himself. And I thought, there is no way this child can read that big, thick book. I mean, it was just a regular juvenile, 150, 200-page book. And when we ended up that trip, we probably drove 14 hours. But when we got there, he had finished that book. And I really didn't believe him when he said he'd read it. But, it just clicked. There was something about that age and that motivation. And that just he always loved books, but he was never the best reader until that clicked in his mind. So I always tell people, don't give up on your child really enjoying reading and actually being able to read something big. It's a challenge. And he rose to it. And it wasn't even my idea or my book.
It must have given you quite a sense of relief at the time because I can relate to that situation. And there are many homeschooling families that do. And when you're in the middle of that period and you have your doubts, is this child ever going to read? What am I doing wrong? What should I do next? How do I
Hmm.
solve this? In the majority of cases, the child will learn to read. And the beauty of homeschooling is that they're not absorbing this peer atmosphere where they suddenly start to believe that they're dumb.
Hmm.
That's one of the tragedies about delayed reading learners is that that often goes with it. And I think your boy, and certainly ours too, was saved from that
Yes.
experience.
Hmm.
Laura, I'm interested in some of the things you concentrated on in a classical approach. I'm just going to assume that Latin had a place in your approach. Can you talk to
Hmm.
us a bit about that, please?
Yes. Latin did have we did include Latin in our curriculum, and I think we started when they were probably third or fourth grade with with a simple Latin curriculum that I had found. Well, I wish I could tell you what it is, but I can't. Um, and we kept the Latin up every year. We weren't always great about, getting it all done, but we just kept going and kept going year after year. Um, until um my we kept going to the till the end. He would take Latin, and he might not finish the whole year curriculum or something, but we just would pick up where we left off the year before. And then when I did his transcript at the end, I just counted up how many year books we had finished that were high school level. But when he went to college, he took Latin there, I believe, as well, because he did a degree in philosophy. And still to this day, he loves Latin. He found it very good. He has a wonderful vocabulary, and both boys did Latin. Um, but the older one seemed to really take off with it.
But the younger one still has this basic knowledge and influence in his life of the benefits of having been doing that. So
Yes.
why? Because you obviously persisted in Latin because you believed it was a good thing for your children to study. Was it the influence of the well-trained mind that cemented that belief for you? So, in other words, why was Latin important to you?
Mm. I just, maybe because I took it when I was in high school, but I wasn't like, oh, I just took it the 1 year. So I wasn't um, fluent in it at all. But I remember thinking, this is an important class. This is a basis for language, um, in so many different languages. And so, um, I think it started there, and then it is a part of the well-trained mind, the guide to classical education. It was emphasized in there. There's a group here in the States called Classical Conversations. It's a kind of a co-op group where people can join the classical conversations and use their curriculum. They tell you exactly what to use, and except for some of the like math and stuff like that, you can use your own. But um, I went to one of their parent trainings that they did in the summer because I was looking for a logic curriculum, and they were going to teach the parents about logic. And I really wanted that, and their writing curriculum. They were overviewing them for parents, and so this same group had a Latin curriculum as well. So it was kind of, I had friends that were doing that, but I wasn't doing the classical conversations, but I did glean from their experience, and we did a co-op, and we taught our Latin together, and our logic together, and our writing together. Um, so that was very helpful.
Mm. I'm going to go and ask you about your co-ops and groups soon, but I've got a couple of other things I want to go over with you as regards to the Latin. Um, it does seem to be, I don't know, like the plain child in the room of really exciting, effervescent children that you might easily overlook. And yet it's such an important topic. And that is one of my regrets that we didn't do more of it. When we were in England, if you remember, I interviewed Professor Michael Ward and
Hmm.
Professor N.T. Wright, and both of those men wished that they had started Latin earlier, even as
Mm,
young as 5, because they
mm,
felt that it would have been easier for them to learn it, that the older you wait, the harder it is to learn. And so
mhm.
I think there's some merit in that. Because I think we tend to like put Latin off until, oh, you've got to wait till you're a teenager before you start Latin because it's so hard. So I thought that was an interesting bit of feedback from those two men.
Yes.
Uh,
Hmm.
The other thing that I'm thinking of too is that I realize logic is a separate subject in itself, but one of the recommendations I've been told about Latin is that it's actually a pursuit of logic in itself, the way you have to work it
Hmm.
all out, which I thought, oh, okay, bonus.
Yes.
You mentioned one of your boys found it really useful for philosophy. So I'm thinking there that the obvious link that Latin has in the sciences, medicine, botany, how was that useful for him in philosophy?
Mm. I'm not sure I can answer that.
Mhm.
Beside the fact that, reading philosophy, you're dealing with ancient, he began with ancient people, ancient philosophers, Aristotle, Plato, so forth. And so reading some of the things that people write about them, maybe the Latin was in there, but and the concepts. So, but I'm not real sure I can answer that.
That's a good
But
enough opening to understand that it's got a,
okay.
but did he also read some original manuscripts that were written in Latin? Could he read from them?
Yes, the curriculum that we used had in the high school age had original Latin manuscripts that he would read, snippets from.
Mm, mm. Could he read
Mhm.
the is it the Vulgate, the Latin version of the Bible?
Um, I don't know. We didn't try that.
Yeah. It just seems
Yeah.
to me to be just so very useful. So even if
Yeah.
you're looking at a botanical word and you know that it has a Latin origin, a derivative, you could pretty much work out what it was going to say just because you know what those segments of the genus or whatever it is that you're looking at.
Yeah. And when I say we didn't read the Vulgate, he had, in his Latin curriculum, they did have it was Christian curriculum. It was called Latina Christiana. That was the beginning one, I believe,
Okay.
um, for the younger ages. And it would have some scripture in there in Latin,
Mm.
and it taught them to pray. I remember we used to sit at the table, Oremus, and that was, I think that means pray. Let us pray, Oremus, and then there was a prayer that we prayed in Latin. And that was from the youngest ages.
Did you notice, or have you got anything particular to say about the contribution that it made to your boys' English?
Yes, both of them have very good vocabulary. They can pick out a word, a long word, and um, know, know kind of what it means. Getting to it had the root word in there, and um, they can get a sense of the meaning. So they did very well when they would have to do their college entrance tests and things like that. They would they would do well on the vocabulary, and I think it had to do with the Latin.
Mm, mm. It must continually extend their as you said, vocabulary and their
Hmm.
phrasing, and to be able to select a precise word where there's no doubt about what your intent or your meaning or the depth of quality of the communication you're trying to come across must be such an advantage to them, even in the arts of talking with other people, holding an intelligent
Hmm.
conversation or a wise debate with someone you can employ.
Hmm.
I'm just thinking that was one of C.S. Lewis's skills was that because languages and the classical languages were part of his skill set, when you read through his books, the precision that he selected his wording with is quite a good example of what I'm talking about.
Yes. Hmm.
Mm.
It is.
Is there anything
And
else
the
you'd like?
younger,
Pardon?
go ahead.
I was just going to say, is there anything else you want to say about Latin?
Um, just that I was going to say my younger son, he took Latin for up into high school, but then he really wanted to take Greek. And so we switched to biblical Greek because we had a tutor. There was opportunity to have a tutor. And with my younger son, I did do things differently, of course, because, he's different. And every child is different. And he especially needed some variety in his life. Things could get monotonous for him. And so being able to change languages, and I felt like he had enough of that. He had gotten enough. And that I think it was after ninth grade, that's when we switched for him to do the Greek. And he liked to have the both of those languages and to be able to use it. And then he went to college and he took Greek it was a Christian college, William Carey University, and he needed a language and he wanted to take the Greek again and try it as an older, student.
This was the son that studied philosophy.
No,
No,
this was the son,
your other
the
boy.
other one. Yeah, he
Mm.
studied history and business.
Okay. So even in his schooling years, when you recognize that he just needed to leave those languages behind at that time, he returned to them later. I find that fascinating.
Yes, both of them, went on in college and studied more of what they
Mm.
had begun.
So I realize this question means that you're going to be speaking on their behalf, but do they use their Latin and Greek just in their everyday life?
Um, you know, I think that the older one who does philosophy is now um, a counselor in psychology and mental health counseling, and and I see him using the philosophy integrated with the psychology and the logic, even if we could bring that in, the logic into his counseling. And he's very well spoken, and and he does have easy for him to choose words where so I think all of that, all of those classical language and Latin and logic really helped him to yeah, that he uses those in some ways, I think, with the just learning psychology itself, um, is the words are just, so foreign to what you would normally use. So not only I think did it help him when he was studying those things, but also then to relate them, to come up with a simpler way of saying things. I think the large vocabulary helps with that. And the younger son, I feel he's writing a book, and he has used some different terms in the book. And I've read the book, and it's good. It's a historical fiction from the 1600s on um, Hungary and Transylvania, and and so and then of course in his Bible, in his Sunday school class or his Bible study at church, um, I noticed that he likes to think about what the Greek word is, that they might be studying.
Mm, mm. There's so much merit to that. So that so I'm getting a clear picture that the investment in the Latin and Greek when they were young has paid off right into their adulthood, which was what I was really, really hoping to hear, so that
Hmm.
homeschooling parents can take that on from your experience and go, actually, yes, it is actually worth committing time to this over the years
Hmm.
that you're educating at home.
Hmm.
All right. Well, moving across to another aspect of the classical approach, which you've already mentioned, logic, teaching a child logic. Um, it takes me straight back to what the professor says to the children in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is logic, logic. Don't they teach children logic in school these days? Um, so could you please explain, justify if you like, why teaching logic to your children is a good idea and at what ages can you start?
Mm, mm. Okay. I think it's a great idea. I loved it myself. Um, I liked helping them with it. I liked having the opportunity to learn it as well because when I was a student, they didn't teach logic in my school. But I just felt like one of the things that we did when we after we first started homeschooling, I realized um, I needed to have a philosophy of homeschooling. Like, what was my goal in this whole thing? I'm gonna commit all this time. What is my goal for my kids, for my homeschool? And so I wrote out a goal, and I was wishing I had it where I could, but anyways, I just wanted to have a philosophy of, what was my philosophy of education and I what was my final goal. And part of it was to help them to think for themselves, to think logically, to think about the world and be able to understand what they believed, how to defend what they believed, how to, to do it, what to speak well. And so because it was a Christian education is what we were giving them. It wasn't a secular education, although uh, well, I'll mention that later, but um so I just felt like logic was important for their overall framework of putting all the things they were learning together to explain it, um, to think about um, arguments and defending their faith. Um, so we started with I think they were probably in about 11, and we started with maybe younger, maybe 9. We started with this series. I'm trying to think if I can come up with the name of the book. Didn't think about that. Um, it had a funny name. Do you know of any books, logic books for young kids?
I don't recall them. I know they're there, which is a relief to
Mm-hmm.
me. You don't have
Yes,
to think of it yourself.
right. But they had some funny names and they were stories, and we would read them at lunchtime. I find that you can teach kids so much at lunch. You just don't eat yourself, and you just teach them right through meal times. Um, but yeah, this logic books would be a story, and then you would have to um some of them would be like a story puzzle, and you would put the little X's on the chart and trying to figure out who had what, like the first man with the blue hat had a strawberry ice cream, and I don't know. They would have it was more of a puzzle kind of logic, and we could do it and do it all together sitting at the table. And those were fun. The kids loved to do them. And then after we graduated from that, we went on up to where they would explain logical fallacy. Oh, it was called the Fallacy Detective. That was the name of one of them. And the Fallacy Detective would explain a different fallacy in each chapter, like the red herring fallacy. And they would explain what that is. They would give examples. Um, and then they would give the kids an opportunity, for you to try it out yourself, you know. Um, so we started that way with the logic before we got into a formal logic curriculum. And I'm trying to think. Now, I didn't bring any of that with me, but then we got into a formal logic curriculum and we started just with real simple things, um, and then built up to more complex.
Mm. So it had a strategic place in your curriculum. So um, you had your math aspect of it. There was Latin, um, logic in your curriculum, the reading of whole books, real books,
Mm-hmm.
and writing exercise in there too. Everything that goes
Mm-hmm.
with that. How would you say a typical day looked for you then, right from the time they were little?
Mm. Well, when they were little, someone gave me some good advice and reminded me that they were little and to be careful not to, to push them too much. Um, though it was hard for me because I don't know, I think I'm kind of driven. Uh, so it was really hard for me not to push them too much. But we would do, if I can remember, we would spend most of our time when they were, little doing just getting them to be able to read and do some math. That was our goal. Um, so we would read the phonics book. I had phonics pathways. I remember that book, and we read those phonics things to get them to learn the sounds and put them together. And then um, we used the Bob books to help them learn. Matt sat on the cat. That kind of, they were little short ones so they could read them themselves and finish. I really still kept that idea that it's a goal to start and finish a book. So I, even with the little, you know, paperback um, readers, and every once in a while I would grab a Beka reader and like with the numbers on the side, it would say like 1.2, like this is their first grade, second, because I was worried. And so I would say, okay, read this. Let me see if you can read this. Um, not, I wouldn't tell them I was worried. I'm just in my mind, you know how you do. You second guessing, oh, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing too much? Am I not doing enough? So, but so reading was a big part. We would read, but I just did the phonics book. It was just basic charts and stuff to read. And then then I would read to them. My husband read to them at night, and we would read like the Narnia series. Um, we started that when I think they were 4, and my younger son was just a baby, just like 1 year old, and he would take naps. And my older son still talks about this. We did secret snack during the nap time of the baby. And that meant that we would get Cheerios and water and bring it to mommy's bedroom, and we would sit on top of mommy's big bed, and I would read the Narnia series to my older son. He was 4, I think, but he loved it. I think he loved the fact that it was the two of us together. He loved to hear it read. He loved the story. And yeah, so my husband would continue that in the evening times later on, all the way up till they were, I don't, they still read together. I tell you, every Saturday, my older son and my husband get on the phone. They live hours apart and they read together. Jeff Jennings had to cook lunch for his wife because she's pregnant, and Jeff read to him The Hobbit, a chapter out of The Hobbit while he was cooking. So they continue this tradition. So it is a lifelong thing. And but so we did that. We did the reading. I would read to them um, maybe some history, a history thing, and I would have them draw what they hear. 'Cause they were too little to write. And boys, they don't like to write anyways. They don't, my boys didn't. really want to write much until they got older. But but they would draw, and then I would say, now tell me about your drawing, and then I would write it out for them. And sometimes I'd make them copy it, so they would learn, the older one to when they were old enough to copy it. But sometimes I would just do it, and we had an art box, and they loved to get in the art box and let me read to them, and they would draw while I read.
Mm, mm,
Um, then there was the math. We would do the math. I think we used Saxon at first for the first few years. And so we would pretty much go by the curriculum of the Saxon.
mm, mm. All right, let's talk about what your afternoons look like. Were they the times when you would, go out to a co-op or a class or a social event? Talk about co-ops and things like that, how that took hold in your life.
Yes, that was when we would do co-ops is in the afternoon. So we'd do PE. We had a PE class that they went to like twice a week. Um, and when they were young, we did the PE and maybe art class. Um, and then they'd just go outside and play, 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 play.
Mm. And the mums would sit and
Yeah.
chat.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes they just play outside, just the two of them and the neighbor kid, not at the co-op. When they got older, we had more co-ops offered. Um, so we had choir, and they would participate in the choir. Um, we had other, like I said, when they got into middle school, um, I wanted my kids to do writing and to do the logic and the Latin, but I wasn't confident in all of those. So my friend, she had done lots of Latin, so she taught the Latin, and I taught the logic. And we had videos also that we could use. And so those were really helpful. I felt like, okay, I can teach this logic if I have the video to watch first, and then let then we can do the exercises, in the book together, or, you know, and go over, and I feel like I could answer the questions. So that was really helpful, to have the video along with it. We did the same thing with the writing. We did the Institute for Excellence in Writing, and Andrew Poudrois is does a great job of teaching those writing skills. Um, and he talks about how boys would rather go out and build forts than sit and do writing. and so he made it very doable, and good for whether if you had boys or girls. And yeah.
Mm. I will put the names of the books and those resources that you've just mentioned, Andrew Padiwa and the Fallacy Detective, the Classical Conversations. I'll make sure I put them in your Latin program in the description box too, so listeners can know they can go back and look at these for ideas. Uh,
Hmm.
Early on in when you were introducing yourself to us all, you talked about was it when you were in the seminary and you um, help lead the group of homeschooling mums with clubs and co-ops and things? Is there anything about co-ops you want to reflect on from that time?
Hmm. Yes, there were. One is that you really need a board of moms and dads too. Usually the moms have more time because they're the ones staying home with the child, um, but to help do that, it's too much for one person to do. So you shouldn't take it on yourself. You should find like-minded people, pray about it, and, you know, come up with what it is you want. What is your goal for a co-op? Um, and then, encourage, I would encourage you to, is you offer a variety of classes as you can. Um, but I would caution moms from taking too many classes, encouraging their kids to do everything. I think that's not a good idea. I think you should choose a few things that you want you let your child choose, what they're interested in, because usually these are going to be extracurricular. Now, if it's math and logic, you want your child to take logic, then you don't give them a choice about that. But if there's some you can give them a choice about, that's nice to be able to do that. If you're trying to get credits for high school, then, sometimes you don't, those classes can be very helpful in getting credit hours. So then again, you could let your child choose, okay, you either take the PE or you're going to have to come up with a fitness schedule, and you have to do it on your own, and you have to check off your hours. So it just makes it a little easier, if they have a class.
It does. It does indeed. I like the idea, well, the two ideas you've got in there is to form a board of people to look after the way your co-op is run. And I like that you have encouraged people to form a philosophy, if you like, a purpose, a mission statement for your co-op, so
Hmm.
that especially if people are coming in who maybe perhaps don't hold to what is important to you, it's very easy for you to insist, if you like, on standards, or you've got something to refer to if something's just not going very well anymore, or it's getting
Right.
uncomfortable. And I
Hmm.
also like in there that you've recommended that you don't need to do everything. I think that's one of the temptations as homeschooling mums, that we want our child to do everything because being busy is a good thing, or you're afraid they might miss out on something, or they'll have gaps,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it can lead to burnout and overwhelm for the child as well as the mother.
Yes.
Is there anything you want to say about that?
Yes. I mean, that is very true. You just, if you try and do too much, you will burn out. Um, and you'll do not, and you won't do things well. You know, um, I think we need to concentrate on doing things well and not doing so many things.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I found myself at that time of burnout after about 10 years. Um, and I just had to step back, and I ended up putting my younger son, who was then probably eighth grade, ninth grade, into like an online school. It was a classical school, but it was online for several classes, just because, I had done too much and I needed to take a break.
Wise lady.
Mm. It was hard.
Yeah.
It was hard. It was hard for my son. After a year, he said, "Mom, can we please go back to doing things the way we used to do them?" And I said, "We can try that, but mommy can only handle so much, and I cannot butt heads with you all year long. You've got to, work with me." So and it did. It improved. Yeah.
Mm.
And I changed some things then as well. We did that next year. We did kind of a joint. I tried to do a lot of joint things. The curriculum I chose was one that could be used for the whole family. With if you had lots of kids, you can integrate a little bit more. So I always tried to do that, but that next year, did a Tolkien series because that was something my boys loved, J.R.R. Tolkien. And so I wrote a unit study for them, and my husband helped me write it because he's a big Tolkien fan, and the boys helped me write it. So we kind of came up with this whole thing, and it went really well because they were involved in it and they were invested in what we did.
That's wonderful that you knew you had the wisdom to know when to pivot and when to choose something else and even write something yourself to fit a need. I think that's fantastic. Have just as a side note there, you wrote a curriculum for on Tolkien. Have you been able to do anything with that so that you could maybe look at publishing it?
Oh no, I haven't. No, I haven't.
Ah. Oh well,
I
I'll
haven't
just
even thought of it.
okay. I'll just leave that then there for you then,
Okay.
Laura.
Okay.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure.
No pressure. Um, Something that we haven't mentioned yet, we've talked about how your husband had a sabbatical in Oxford, but that his area of expertise that is ethics. So
hmm
did you have him teach ethics to your boys, or because it was just such a normal way of living and talking in your household, did you find that teaching ethics to your boys was more incidental? How did you approach that?
Yes, I think it was more incidental. Um, we would have conversation at the dining room table, around the meal. Um, that would be where, you know, those conversations would come in. Um, the curriculum that I chose was called Tapestry of Grace. And one of the reasons I chose it once the boys got to be like 11, 10, 11, was because I knew my older son was interested in philosophy. And so that curriculum had like a philosophy thread, strand that you could do. Um, um, if you wanted. And so when you could choose from like either philosophy or worldview, um, and or maybe I can't quite remember, but um, it just had options. And I thought this is great. A Christian curriculum that offers philosophy. This is what I want for them because I know he's heading that way. Um, we used to take him to there was a conference here at the seminary called Defend the Faith, and um, he loved to attend that conference, and he would he'd sit in on different classes, and he did that for years. So that in itself was an education, even though I didn't make him do much assignments from it. I didn't make him write much up. Once he got a little bit older, I did, but not much. But he would just go in and soak it all up. He's an auditory learner, so he can just take it in like I can't do.
Mm. Um, is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you would like to say to homeschooling listeners, especially the mums?
Mm-hmm. Mm. Well, I really like diagramming sentences. I thought that was really important when they were younger. Um, I thought that was a good way to learn grammar.
Diagramming sentences.
Mm-hmm.
Is that your phrase or is that a method of teaching?
I think it's an old-fashioned way of teaching. I mean, I think years ago, I didn't learn diagramming sentences, but I think the generation before me did. Um, and then now it's kind of you can find it in the classical. curriculum. So it's, you draw the line, you have a certain place you put the verb, a certain place you put the noun, and the adjectives kind of come at a diagonal from the noun, and you pick out all the pieces of the sentence, and they have a certain spot in the diagram. So I thought that was really helpful. I think it helped them with their Latin too, because you would know what a noun is, and you knew how nouns have certain endings, and it just helped you to be familiar with the different parts of speech, I think.
I'm fascinated,
Um,
Laura, with the idea that it could actually help you form a much better sentence structure if you know that
mhm,
inside a proper sentence you need all these things, and then to go back and look for where they go. I think
mhm.
that's great. I haven't come across that.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you the book.
Yes.
One book, the first language lessons for the well-trained mind. So it's from the well-trained mind author, um, uh, Jessie Wise. She's one of the authors, and Sarah Buffington. And it's called First Language Lessons
Okay. First
for
language
the Well-Trained Mind.
lessons. Okay. That's wonderful.
And I love that curriculum, like even from the one that I'm looking at is like fourth grade level four, but even from first grade, amazing curriculum for teaching um, just language from very young. It wasn't, they didn't have to write anything. It was all oral, and it included poems and memorizing poems and funny things in it, and then memorizing like the definition of a noun is a person, place, thing, or idea. You know, the verb, what's a verb? And they could spit it out, and it just helped them to get it in their mind while they were at that stage of learning where they could soak it in easily, even if they didn't know exactly what it meant. Later, they would put that in. So, so I like that one. Um, The other thing I would recommend is, well, when I was doing it, you would have audio books, or um in the car. I don't know about, we spent a lot, we would spend a significant time, traveling, or just going, downtown and back. And we had a classical history CDs that were for children, and I'd put those in, and they would always say, "Put the tapes in, Mom, put the tapes in," and because they didn't want to miss any. They when we were traveling, they would always want to listen to the history. In it was good material and fun to listen to in the car.
Very practical use of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, Laura,
So
if you could go back and have a cup of tea with your young, just starting out homeschooled self, what advice would you give her?
I would say enjoy your children. I mean, just enjoy. I think a lot of times I got very legalistic about things, and didn't, and I was too uptight, about things. So I would think I would laugh more and enjoy them more, even as teenagers, um, especially as teenagers, but all the way through. Not to get so uptight about whether they finished, the book, or things like that. That someone gave me some advice one time. I think they said, like, if you can finish like 80% of a math textbook, but that's plenty. They always repeat at the beginning anyways. So that gave me some leeway, to fit and to relax about that. Um, and not and to trust that God is leading you. That um uh, to pray for your kids um was so vital to raising I feel like to raising children, because God is the one who made them, and he gives us clues about how they're created. I remember my younger son, who we were sitting at the table doing math again, and he was probably 11 and 12, and he said, Mom, we were graphing things, and he was just pitching a fit, his 12-year-old fit. And he said, Mom, I have to do something with my hands. Can I do something with my hands? And I thought, we're graphing. That's with your hands. But that wasn't what he meant. And um, so we found something. I realized it was too long for him to sit still. I don't know if he has ADD or what, but he definitely needed to move. And so we found um, stained glass um, as an art that he could do, and we found someone who could give him lessons and get him started. And so he would do that. He would go out to the garage and he'd get his stained glass stuff, and he would work on that when he would get frustrated. So that was kind of all throughout out the day. If he got, you know, if we just got where we couldn't handle it anymore, he'd go out and work on his whatever he was making. And he'd make little, sun catchers and things like that. And then he sold them. And so it became something that he was really proud of. And so that, just being willing to listen to your child and hear what they're saying. I'm so glad I listened, because they know, how they're feeling. And then that was such a good, when he just said, I've got to do something with my hand. And that was it, and then it clicked in my mind, like, okay, he's right. We got to find something he can do. Um, so I think just listening to your child is really helpful. You don't have to always feel like you got to have all the control, you know,
Mm.
but trust that God is in control. If we ask him and listen, um, he'll guide us. He promises to give us wisdom if we ask and believe that he's going to do it. He will do it. So,
Mm. Mm.
um, and I think I would have majored more on. I would tell my young mom self to not be afraid to spend time teaching. I mean, it was a Christian homeschool, to spend more time um, teaching my children to study the Bible. We memorized scripture, we did lots of things, but sometimes as they got older, we didn't focus so much on just the Bible. It would be integrated into the curriculum, but sometimes now I think, I wish I would have really helped them in that way.
Mm. Mm. Good reflections.
Hmm.
Well, Laura, you have downloaded some wonderful advice, your experiences, and so much of it has been so practical, especially coming in from that classical approach. I was so looking forward to talking to you today to get this from you. You're the first person I've interviewed that used that principle for their education, and I am really happy with the time that we've spent together today. It's wonderful to see you again. And I know that other homeschooling parents listening in will be so grateful for your time that you've taken. Thank you for your generosity.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much. You're really good at interviewing, because when we started, I thought, I don't know if I have anything to say. And you kept me talking the whole time.
Everybody's got a story.
You're very good at that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Hmm.
All right then, Laura. Thanks again.